Hola amigos, ¿cómo están? Bienvenidos. Welcome to Spring Spanish. Yo soy María Fernanda and I am one of the Spanish teachers here at Spring Spanish. In this video, I will teach you all the chunks and phrases in Spanish you need when traveling by taxi, so you get at your destination safely. From finding a taxi, getting to a place, speaking to the driver, solo si quieres, only if you want to, and to the end of paying and getting off the taxi. So next time you're on a trip in a Spanish-speaking country, you don't fall in the tourist trap and you can show off your Spanish skills using these chunks. So, ¿estás listo? Wait, I said I will teach you Spanish chunks, right? But what is a chunk? I am glad you asked. Chunks are word combinations Spanish native speakers use all the time while talking to each other. They never change and you should just learn by heart as a whole. So they roll off your tongue as a whole while you are speaking Spanish. And you don't have to think about grammar, which preposition to use, etc. The easiest way to discover such chunks is not by learning words and grammar, but by listening to Spanish native speakers actually speak Spanish. Throughout this lesson, you will discover many chunks, and sometimes I will give you a chunk alert when there's an especially important one. So, if you hear this, pay extra attention. By the way, we teach Spanish entirely through chunks on our YouTube channel. If you don't want to miss any of our 5 weekly lessons, then click on the subscribe button and the bell button to get all the notifications. Now, empecemos con la clase. Let's start with the lesson. Buscando un taxi. Finding a taxi. In Mexico, there are a couple of ways you can get a taxi from. I think the most common is going to La Parada de Taxis, the taxi stop, and this could be found either on the street or maybe outside a hotel or restaurant. But if you can't find any, you may ask the following. ¿Dónde está la parada de taxis más cercana? Where is the closest taxi stop? Otra forma de conseguir taxis, another way to get a taxi, is by llamando por teléfono a la estación, calling the taxi station. In that case, you could say, Hola, ¿me puedes enviar un taxi a la dirección Reforma 55, por favor? Hi, may I have a taxi sent to the address Reforma 55, please? A la dirección, to the address, is a perfect example of a chunk that never changes, and you should learn it by heart. You shouldn't be thinking about which preposition to use or which gender dirección is in Spanish. Bypass all that by memorizing it as a whole. Another way to find a taxi is por una app, through an app. In Mexico City, for example, there are a lot of options like Uber, Jaxi, Cabify. However, watch out, because if you go to small cities, like for example mine, I just found out that Uber is coming, so we're still far ahead. In that case, I would recommend you to use any of the options I mentioned before. But you may also hail a taxi by raising your hand, but I think that it's always the safest option to call una compañía de taxis, a taxi company. And I suggest that before you go into your destination in any of the Spanish-speaking countries, you do a bit of research about which apps or which taxi companies are the safest to use, and like that, you can avoid any non-desirable situation. Pedir que te lleven a tu destino, asking to be taken to your destination. So there you are, you find yourself inside the taxi, and the first thing that el taxista, taxi driver, will ask you is, Señor, or señorita, ¿dónde lo llevo? Or, ¿dónde quiere que lo lleve? That means, sir or miss, where shall I take you? Or where do you want me to take you? In that case, you should answer. Hola, señor, ¿podría llevarme al aeropuerto? Or wherever you want to go. Hi, sir, could you take me to the airport? And what about if you need to get there really fast? Then try saying this. Por cierto, tengo un poco de prisa. ¿Podríamos tomar la ruta más rápida, por favor? I'm in a bit of a hurry. Could you take the fastest route, please? Tengo un poco de prisa. I'm in a bit of a hurry. Or simply, tengo prisa. I'm in a hurry. Is another good example of a chunk. Learn it by heart as a whole so it rolls off the tongue whenever you need to tell someone you are busy. By the way, if you'd like to discover the full 4-step method to learn to speak Spanish entirely through chunks, check out the free Spanish training we have on our website where we explain how it works and give you a full demo. Link is inside the description. So what about if your taxi is going too fast? Then you could say, ¿Podría manejar más despacio, por favor? Could you drive slower, please? And if you need to know the form of payments, which I recommend that you do that in advance, then ask the driver, ¿Acepta pagos con tarjeta? Do you take card payments? And if the driver says, no, solo efectivo, no, only cash, then try to ask them kindly, ¿Podría parar en un cajero automático, por favor? Could you stop at an ATM, please? Also be aware that there are some taxis in Mexico that do not use taximeter, so make sure to know the price in advance. Like that you will know precisely how much you're paying, or maybe you need to negociar el precio, bargain the price. For example, check out the following conversation. Señor, ¿cuánto cuesta ir de aquí al centro? Sir, how much does it cost to go from here to the city center? Cuesta como 500 pesos. It costs like 500 pesos. Uf, no. Eso está muy caro. Ayer me cobraron 350. Uf, no. That is too expensive. Yesterday I was charged 350. Lo siento. Lo más barato es 400 pesos. I'm sorry, the cheapest is 400 pesos. Ok, muchas gracias. Esperaré otro. Ok, thank you very much. I will wait for another one. Believe me, if you're a good negociador, then you will get your price. And if the taxi does have a taximeter, please remind them to turn it on by saying, ¿Podría encender el taxímetro, por favor? Could you switch on the meter, please? Tener una conversación con el conductor. Having a conversation with the driver. This is of course entirely optional. I personally like to ask taxi driver for advice when I am in another country as a tourist. You know that it's a fact that the taxi drivers always know the best and cheapest place to eat local food. Therefore, if you want to ask this while you are as a tourist, you might say, Disculpe, señor, ¿qué lugar recomienda para comer? Excuse me, sir, which place do you recommend to eat? Que tenga las 3 Bs. Bueno, bonito y barato. It needs to have the 3 Bs. Good, nice, and cheap. Well, in English, there are not 3 Bs, but it makes sense in Spanish, no? You could also ask questions to the driver like, ¿Qué lugares me recomienda visitar? What places do you recommend to visit? ¿A qué lugares van los locales normalmente? Which places do locals usually go to? By the way, you might have a chatty driver, as in Mexico at least it is common that they speak to you, unless you decide not to, or the driver might be de mal humor, in a bad mood. El pago y llegar a tu destino. The payment and arrival to your destination. Just as a reminder, make sure that if you're paying with a card, that you have asked this in advance. For some reason, this makes the driver very upset if you don't have cash. They don't want to take card payment option or they do not have them. But if you have already discussed this in advance, then expect the driver to say, Ya llegamos, son 65 pesos. We have arrived, or we are here. It is 65 pesos. Then you could just simply reply with, Aquí tiene. There you have it. Muchas gracias y que tenga un buen día. Thank you very much and have a nice day. By the way, don't forget your luggage in the trunk. Remember you were going to the airport? So remind the driver by saying, ¿Podría abrir la cajuela, por favor? Could you open the trunk, please? And please, if you negotiated a price and for some reason your taxi driver has Alzheimer and says suddenly more, then you should say, Me dijo que costaría 100 pesos y eso voy a pagar. You told me it would cost me 100 pesos, so that's what I'm going to pay. For that matter, if you're using local taxis, my advice is to always carry cash in small bills to avoid drivers tricking you. So in Mexico, taxi drivers might help you with your luggage, but tipping is optional. Si quieres darle propina a tu chofer, if you would like to tip your driver, you can give them 10 o 15%, 10 to 15%. Mis amigos, I think after this lesson, you're ready to hop on a taxi and show off your Spanish. If you want more Spanish lessons with travel vocabulary, let me know by leaving me a thumbs up. By the way, ¿qué país hispanohablante te gustaría visitar primero? Which Spanish-speaking country would you like to visit first? Let me know in the comments below so the other Spring Spanish teachers and myself can prepare you more useful and cool lessons. Also, if you enjoyed the chunk alerts and want to learn more about chunking, don't forget to watch our free Spanish training if you wish to learn more about learning Spanish through observing native speakers and identifying chunks, and without having to cram word lists and grammar rules. It will come in handy on your next trip to Mexico, Latin America, or even España. You can register by clicking the link inside the description box. I will see you next time. Hasta la próxima. Adiós.
Don't forget to subscribe, drop a like, and share the videos with your friends.